Alright guys, so in this video I want to talk about lifecycle methods of a component, and the only one that we've really dealt with so far is render. Okay, so render is actually part of the core component class, and it's required because it's needed to render the component out. But there's other lifecycle methods that fire off at certain times that you may need to use for certain things. So what I want to do in this video is just create a test component and just show you all the different lifecycle methods. So I'm going to go into, let's actually just create a folder in our components folder, and we'll just call this test. Okay, in case there's anything else that we need to just look at that's not part of the project as well. And I'll create a folder in there, a file in there called test.js. Okay, so we'll create a class-based component. Lifecycle methods are only available in classes, so RCC tab. And we're going to just export it down here. So export test. And let's go ahead and bring it into app.js. So I'll just copy this down, and we want to bring in from component /test/test and the component name, which is test. Okay, and then I'm just going to add a route for it here. So we'll copy this one down and we'll say route. We want the path to be /test, and the component should be test. All right, and then we'll just put like an h1 in the render. So let's return div, and we'll put an h1, and we'll say test component. So let's save that, and let's navigate to /test. Okay, so here's our test component. Now let's take a look at the different lifecycle methods. So one of I would say the second most popular one that you'll be using is component did mount, which it does just that. It fires whatever you put in that function is going to fire off after the component mounts. Okay, so let's go right above the render and let's say component, and you can see I have a drop down in VS Code of all the different component or anything that starts with component, and these are all lifecycle methods. So let's say component did mount, and we don't need to use an arrow here because this is going to be available within any of these lifecycle methods because these are part of the component class. It's part of React. So I just want a console.log when this fires off. So we'll say component did mount. And if I save this, and you'll see it runs down here. Now, component did mount is probably the second most used lifecycle method, at least in my experience, because this is usually where you'll make your HTTP calls to an API or to a backend. If you're fetching data from within your component and putting it into the component state or whatever, this is usually where you would call the initial request. Okay. Now we also have component will mount. So let's say component will mount, and we'll go ahead and change this. And this runs before it mounts. So if I save this, you'll see that component will mount is going to run first and then did mount. But generally you want to put all your AJAX calls and stuff like that in component did mount. We also have component did update. Now this is only going to run when the component updates. Let's see, did update. Okay, so if I save this, you'll see it's not going to run down here. There's nothing to update. And what I mean by update is like changing its state or something like that. In fact, if I were to copy this, and you guys don't have to do this, I'm going to delete this after, but if I go to my context provider component and put this in here and save it, if I go to the list of contacts here, since this is coming from the state from the context, if I delete, watch down in the console, I'm going to delete, and we see component did update. Okay, so when your component updates and re-renders, that's going to run, but it doesn't run on the initial mount. We also have component will update. Let's see if that runs. If we say component will update, and let's see, so if we go ahead and delete, you'll see that both of those will run. All right, so I'm going to just copy these. I'm going to cut these out of the context and put them back in the test, or put them in the test. Now we have another one called component will receive props. So let's say component will receive props, and this will actually take in props and state, or I should say next props. Next props and next state. And what this does, this isn't going to run, but I'll put a console log in here anyways. What this does is when your component receives new properties, then this will run, and this is usually used with Redux. When you have a state in Redux, like application level state, you can take it into a single component and you can map it as props. So you can turn the piece of state into a component prop, and then that's when this runs, and you can get the new props that are coming in through here, and you can do whatever you want. You can manipulate it, you can assign it to state, or do whatever you want with it. Now, one thing that really sucks is that component will receive props along with component will mount and component will update are actually being deprecated. You can still use them in React 17. Okay, React 17 is the next version of React, but you just have to add the unsafe underscore flag like that to be able to use it. Okay, because React it's becoming a more asynchronous nature, and I guess these go against that asynchronous nature. But it just, I don't like it because I love this lifecycle method when working with Redux. It makes things very easy. Instead, you're supposed to now use this get derived from state. It's actually a static method. So if we search for React lifecycle, there's actually a pretty good article, which is this right here, React 16.3 plus component lifecycle. And I would suggest reading this, going through this, and you can see the deprecated functions. It doesn't have will mount here, but I'm pretty sure that's also deprecated, all the wills. And then they have this get derived state from props, which as you can see takes in next props and previous state. So let's actually grab that and put that in here. Okay, so that needs to be defined as static. Now you have to actually return from this. Let's see, does it say it here? You have to return either some state that you want to change or null, or you're going to get an error. So if we go back to our test component, let's go to test, and you'll see that a valid state object or null must be returned from this. So to shut that error up, I'll have to either return some state, which I don't have in this component, or return null. And we will be using this later on, so you'll learn more about it later. And we're also getting an error because we're using these legacy life cycles, which I guess now they're calling them, with get derived state from props. And then another new one is get snapshot before update. And basically this fires before mutations are made, like before the DOM is updated. So we'll go ahead and put that in there as well. And just so you guys have this, so you know all the different lifecycle methods. And this takes in previous props and previous state, and you can manipulate things as you need. I actually haven't used this in an application yet. Both of these are very new. All right, so did not properly initialize. Expected state to be an object, but it was undefined. So I have no state, so it's complaining. So if I put state equals, let's say test. Okay, now that error goes away because I actually have some state. So from get derived state from props, you can't use, and this is what throws me off, is you can't use set state. You can't say this dot set state, and you can do that in will receive props. And get derived state from props, you actually have to return the state. Like we could say return test something. Okay, so we would do it like that. You actually return the state rather than call set state. So it's a little confusing, but later on we will be using this. We'll also be using this for something as well. in the Firebase. I believe it's in the Firebase project. But these are the different lifecycle methods. I would suggest also giving this a read, just for the new props. I'm sorry, the new lifecycle methods, and also the state and lifecycle documentation. I would suggest going through all of the React documentation. I mean, we're talking about most of this stuff, but you know, this is the official documentation, and it's pretty good compared to a lot of different, a lot of other frameworks and stuff. All right, so that's going to be it, guys. In the next video, what I want to do is get into making HTTP requests, working with, you know, Fetch and Axios and stuff like that. We're going to be using Axios for the most part. I will give you a Fetch example, though, in the next video. And like I said, if we're doing it from a component, you'll usually do it in the component did mount lifecycle method. All right, so I will see you in the next video.